Alright everybody, what's going on? It's your main man Zera. Let's talk about Classic WoW Phase 5 BiS. But before we do, I just want to give a big shout out to everybody who was so supportive in the comment sections, on the community post, in the Discord. Thank you guys for the prayers and well wishes. My wife gave birth to our first child over the weekend. Her name is Little Eleanor, and she was born at 4:49 in the morning on Friday, and it was... You know how they say it's a life-altering experience? That's not exactly how I would describe it. I would say perspective-changing experience. I don't look at anything in the world the same way that I used to, because I'm not just looking out for me and my wife. I'm also looking out for my little munchkin who can't do anything to affect the world around her. So I have to be there to protect her, and my wife the same way. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm getting enough sleep. My wife and I are kind of doing shifts. My wife will stay up during the day, and I'll go to bed, and I'll stay up all night. I'll go to bed around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, sleep till about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and we just kind of rotate. Gives me and my wife enough time to be together during the day and the afternoons. And but today was a really rough night. We gave Munchkin some medicine for some vitamin D supplements because my wife is vitamin D deficient, and she doesn't really get a lot of sunlight due to her long hours at the clinic. Hopefully we can change that during her break. But yeah, Munchkin didn't really agree with it, so it's been a long night. It's 5, almost 6 a.m. now, and my wife has yet to go to sleep. So we're both going to get no sleep today. Thankfully, her family's coming this weekend, or coming over today, so we should get a break and get some rest. But just want to say thank you to everybody for your support. We love you, and the wife really does appreciate it as well. So let's go ahead and dive into Phase 5, Classic WoW BiS. I promised everybody this video was coming, and it is. And this is just a quick breakdown of what talent trees we're using. As you may or may not be aware of, AQ40 has a very unique situation. There's no types for encounters in a lot of these bosses. They're typeless. The Qiraj don't really have a type so much, and that being the case, monster slaying, humanoid slaying doesn't really come into effect here. Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, and let me know in the comment section if I am, I'm not 100% certain on AQ20, but AQ40 I know for a fact, none of the bosses qualify as beast, giant, whatever. So monster slaying, humanoid slaying is not going to come in handy. So this is the #1 DPS spec you're going to be able to have in Classic WoW moving into Phase 5, specifically for AQ. So this is the build we're working with. So the first thing we're going to look at is going to be Tier 1. We're going to set up 4 separate, types of gear, and your best bet is going to be able to chase after whichever one you're closest to. So if you've got mostly T1 but you don't have all of T2, go after the T1 BiS. If you've got mostly T2 but no T1, or vice versa, go after T2. Same thing with PvP gear. If you rank 12, go after the rank 12 set, and you'll be good to go. Matter of fact, let me rephrase that. There's only one piece of rank 12 gear that you're going to wear in this current build. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. But thankfully, if you're rank 12, you can buy some of the pieces that are there, and then if not, you have to compete less for certain pieces of Dragonstalker, so on and so forth. But let's dive headlong into the discussion. So Giantstalker, of course, you're wearing your 8-piece set. You've got the Falcon's Call buff on your helm and your legs. You've got max enchants. We get access to plus 15 agi in Phase 5. That's going to be nice. Cloak of the Fallen God is a cloak that comes off of the Eye of Cthulhu quest, so this is pretty much going to drop every raid, so you'll eventually get your hands on this. This won't be a problem. It's not like you're going to have to compete with your tanks or anything like that for this, so this won't be a problem. As for everything else, the Silphid Claw is the only other weapon you're going to replace here. Now, I will say this, Fang of the Faceless does have some competition if you're Alliance. If you want to get your hands on Brutality Blade, that 9 agility actually comes out to be a little bit better with Blessing of Kings over, say, Fang of the Faceless, but again, that's a stretch. You're most likely not going to be able to get both Brutality Blade and the Silphid Claw. Now granted, the Silphid Claw is of course replacing the main hand Hakari Blade out of Zul'Gurub. So if you have access to Warblade of Hakari versus, say, Brutality Blade, you should wear Brutality Blade with Warblade of Hakari or Fang of the Faceless. Either one of these, since these are basically the same exact weapon, or same exact stats rather. Brutality Blade is a little bit better, but only in a raid setting, only when you're getting raid buffed. Outside of raid buffs, it doesn't quite stack up as well as these two, so I'm going to leave that judgment up to you guys. That's the same for all 4 sets of gear. The weapon you use as Alliance, as a Horde, it's a it's an open shut case. You go with Silted Claw, go with Fang of the Faceless, and until you get Silted Claw, rock Warblade of Akari main hand. But if your alliance, that decision is there for you. If Brutality Blade is available, it is better in a raid sense, but outside of raid, when you're not buffed with Blessing of Kings and all this other good stuff, then using, you know, the Warblade and Fang together are going to be your best option. So use your best judgment and go forward with pride. All right, so again, we're an AP set bonus on Giantstalker across the board. Easy enough, explainable. The rings here, okay, let me get this out of the way. T1 has the advantage of getting, you know, 1% more hit available to it by comparison to T2. So T2 is not going to be using Ring of the Godslayer here. It will be using the Signet Ring of the Bronze Dragonflight. As a matter of fact, all three of the other sets of gear will be doing the same thing because they lack 1% hit. But as you can tell, the Signet Ring of the Bronze Dragonflight is quite literally very similar stats to Ring of the Godslayer. Ring of the Godslayer just has, you know, 3 more agility and 4 more stamina and doesn't have the 1% chance to hit. Whereas in Signet Ring of the Bronze Dragonflight does have the 1% chance to hit, but it lacks slightly on the agility and stamina side. So since T1 doesn't need the extra hit, giving it Ring of the Godslayer makes the most sense. You get a little bit more DPS out of that. For Ring of the Qiraj Fury, this is going to be our go-to ring. This is like a upgraded version of QSR, if you will, and even an upgraded version of Don Julio's. This is a great ring. It's amazing. You're going to love this ring. The only other thing that I would recommend moving into, you know, moving into trinket territory is have some patience. Yes, these are our best trinkets, but you're going to have to compete with a lot of other people. I've heard rogues say that this is their BiS. I've heard warriors say this is their BiS. And then I've heard warriors and rogues scoff at other rogues and warriors saying that these are their BiS. So the trinkets are a mixed bag of emotions. The undoubted best openers for us is going to be Badge of the Swarm Guard and also Jom Gabar. This is going to be our best opener, hands down, not even close. Having the ability to pop Badge of the Swarm Guard, go 10 seconds into the rotation, build up that armor penetration, and then pop Jom Gabar on top of that, opening up another 5 seconds to allow both of them to tick together, and then popping Rapid Fire for the full 15-second duration of both Jom Gabar and Badge of the Swarm Guard, you can do a lot of damage. And if the RNG gods are with you, you can do a tremendous amount of damage. And then, of course, you will Fiend Death swap out to your Royal Seal and your Black Hand's Breath. And for those of you that are shouting that Drake Fang Talisman is BiS, please don't take this the wrong way, but that's not really an accurate statement, because while it does have 8 more attack power by comparison to Royal Seal, if you wear Drake Fang Talisman in the hopes of depending on it for hit, you're really hamstringing yourself because you're not allowing yourself to be able to utilize the double DPS trinket swap, okay? So don't get DFT to rely on it for hit. Get it for the increased attack power. But again, hunters need to be the absolute last people to get their hands on DFT, because really all we're getting out of this is 8 more attack power. So the Royal Seal is a significant placeholder in the meantime, so don't fret about DFT, because the second that Nax comes out, we're going to get our hands on the Slayer Crest, which is 64 attack power and 260 attack power on demand. So that is going to be our go-to. So don't fret about getting DFT. If you're still pushing for DFT, please don't. Let the rogues, let the warriors, let the feral druids, let them have their way. Let them, feral tanks have their way with it. And then, once nobody else wants it, if you've gotten lucky and you've had 7, 8, 9 drop and nobody else wants it, okay, by all means take it, but don't use it to depend on the hit. I just wanted to put that out there. Okay, so let's look at what the stats look like for T1. Now this does say unbuffed up here in the top left. Just ignore that. This is from the previous video, but I did label it T1. This is going to be your typical buffs. This is everything you can be buffed with going into a raid. So we're not going super crazy with it. We're not doing like, Dark Moon Fair buff. We're not doing War Chief's Blessing for Alliance. We're not doing Leader of the Pack or Battle Shout. But more or less, we've got Elixir of the Mongoose, Ground Scorp by Kasai. You've got Juju Power, Juju Might, and Scroll of Agility on your pet. And you've also got Spirit of the Zandalar on yourself. You got DM Tribute buffs. You've got Rallying Cry, Songflower Serenade. You've got all your typical Blessing of Kings and Arcane Intellect, Fortitude, so on and so forth. These are your typical buffs that every raid is most likely going to have as your alliance. And again, if you're a horde, don't really pay too close attention to Blessing of Kings, because while, yes, we do have kings that's more easily accessible to us, and while that may not be fair, the Horde have a lot of ways to make up for that. Like, for example, Orcs have higher pet damage, and Trolls, of course, have Berserking, and, you know, those two alone can bridge the gap a lot closer than you might think. Now, Taurens, unfortunately, y'all are kind of screwed unless you get lucky and you have a Shaman with Grace of Air. Grace of Air for Hunters is amazing if you can score it. And if your Shaman is totem dancing or totem twisting, I think they call it, it is certainly doable. But again, I get it, but this is not really going to change your stat weights too drastically. If you really wanted to nitpick, you could say, okay, stuff with higher agility is going to be better than attack power. But again, at this point, at this stage in the game, it's not going to be so much of a difference to where it's going to make and break the build. It's really not. And at the same time, Hunters, Horde have access to Spirit of the Zandalar, which is a 15% stat boost. So you guys are basically have your own version of Kings. I know it's not as easily accessible, and sometimes you know it's hard to get it because, you know, your time before raid, you may not be able to snag it. But if you make the effort to make that, you know, a priority, you can really make up some ground and really make this impact you. So this is everybody's BiS across the board. There's really not a whole lot of difference between Alliance and Horde at this point because of Spirit of Zandalar being accessible and because of the gear starting to become a little bit more fleshed out. There's not really a whole lot of room for diversity, if you will. So, but looking at this, Giantstalker by itself is going to give you around 740 DPS, single target. Now, obviously, this is Ragnaros. His armor count's a little higher than other bosses. Other bosses aren't quite so high. Like, for example, if I threw on Lucifer on here, you would see a significant increase in single target and cleave damage. That's because of the armor value that Lucifer has is significantly lower than Ragnaros. So you see this change to 791.1, almost a 30-point jump from Ragnaros, and this course jumped 250 points almost. So these are really significant changes here. So again, T1's going to win out in a cleave fight. If you're in a cleave fight, Lucifron or Gehanus or maybe Garb, perhaps if mobs are positioned correctly, things of that nature, yes, T1's going to win out total damage. But in a single target matchup, it is the lowest of the 4 sets that we're going to look at today. So that's really what I wanted to point out. Again, there are a couple of variations you could potentially do, but this is the one that's going to give you the maximum amount of damage. So again, this is it right here. I'm going to have a link down in the description below. You guys can check out the links to these 60 upgrades. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Tier 2.5. This is, of course, going to be your next best setup. I know some people don't really care for Striker's Garb. They think it's garbage. I think it's terrible. And, you know, shame on the hunter that wears it. Well, I wouldn't judge a book completely by its cover just yet. The thing that Strikers loses out on in the end is going to be a combination of things. Number one is the fact that you don't have any pet utility built into this gear set. So like normally with Giantstalker and Dragonstalker, you get so much more stamina for your pet, you get so much more spell resistance for your pet. You don't have that here. You do get some really nice things like the 3%, you get the 2-minute reduction on the cooldown of rapid fire. You get a substantial amount more stamina. You can also get some really nice plus to healing, which is good for things like your min pet, which is awesome for like open world farming and things of that nature. And it can also buff your arcane shot on arcane vulnerability fights like Chromagus and other things. But at the end of the day, I don't personally believe that it really makes up for the resistance and the health benefit to your pet. That's just my opinion. I don't really think it's going to beat out Dragonstalker or Giantstalker in most of the fights that include things like, you know, magic resistances for your pet. However, I will say this. If you are out in the open world, T2.5 is a godsend. It is an absolute godsend. The sheer amount of mana and health you're going to have, not to mention the HP 5 you'll have added to Min Pet, really helps you mitigate a lot of your downtime, and you can just have a ball with it. So this is a really, really cool set, but this is pretty self-explanatory. Most of the pieces are kind of similar outside of the 5-piece set for Striker's Garb. And of course, you're going to replace the gloves, the belt, and the bracers so that you can have significant enough hit. Wrist Guard's the True Flight is your best hit percentage bracers in the game for hunters. Osiren's Binding is the next best thing for you for hunters. There is the Belt of Never-Ending Agony, and here's the thing that I'll say about that. If you're unbuffed and this is accessible to you, go for it. It's awesome out in the open world when you don't have raid buffs. Otherwise, I don't know. I would seriously consider not even thinking about rolling on this, because this is clearly a rogue weapon all day. They'll freak out if you roll on this, so hold off, let your rogues get it, and if in the off chance it's fixing to get D'd or something, go ahead and snag it up. It's nice to use out in the open world when wearing T2.5, because it's got really nice attack power, it's got crit, it's got hit, it just doesn't have raw agility. But at the end, if you're not getting buffs from raid, that 20 agility is only going to be equivalent to 40 attack power, but that 64 attack power will come in handy. So it's a really nice bump if you're out in the open world, but otherwise, don't worry about it. Just grab Osiren's Bindings. That is hunter gear through and through. Drops from AQ20 off of the last boss. Swipe that up. It's a great piece. Veclor's Glove of Devastations. This is like the official Sixx piece to the Striker's Garb set. It looks exactly like it goes with Striker's Garb. It's got hunter gear. It's got hunter gear written all over it. Agi, Stamp, Intellect, 1% crit. This is a great pair of gloves. Swipe these up as soon as you can if you're going to go with Striker's Garb. Now again, your 5-piece is going to be your helmet, your shoulders, your chest, your legs, and your boots. And again, they've got the HP 5 on them. They've got the crit gear stacked on top of them, but they also have a significant amount of agility. Compared to T2 and T1, these things have a ton of agility on them. And then, of course, you're still missing 1% hit, so you got to swipe up the Bronze Dragonflight Ring and then get the Ring of Qiraj Fury. And then, of course, the trinkets are the same as before. So let's just go ahead and take a look real fast at how this plays out. This is going to be pretty self-explanatory, but again, buffs all being equal here, you're looking at about a 748 damage in a single target encounter. If you can remember, look back at T1, it's 739.5. So T2 is about somewhere in the neighborhood about 9 to a 10 DPS bump in single target. Not substantial by any stretch, but I want you to really pay attention here to the health count. So 7,000 health, a little under 5,000 mana, and then all of a sudden, boom, over almost 500 more health, and then almost 1,000 more mana. I mean, Striker's Garb is impressive when it comes to having a substantial amount of health and mana, which makes it a really good farming set. But beyond that, if you can't wear T2 8-piece set bonus and you're comfortable with your pet not having an immense amount of survivability, and then go for it. Go for Striker's Garb. It's a phenomenal set. It's better than Tier 1 in single target encounters, but it still lags behind Tier 2 just a little bit, and let's go ahead and take a look at that right here. So Tier 2, we'll pull that up right here. So this is all Dragonstalker. You've got your 8-piece Dragonstalker set. You've got your Falcon's Call and everything. You've got the ZG enchant on your shoulders. Prester's, of course, hasn't changed. Cloak of the Fallen God, Sylphid Claw. Everything is exactly the way it was with T2.5, except you're slapping on 8 Dragonstalker, basically. You've got the Signet Ring for that extra chance to hit, and Qiraj Fury. The trinkets are the same. So let's hop on over to Tier 2 and look at the damage difference. So this is 752.6. Again, all things being equal, all the same buffs and everything else. You do have a little bit less health than Tier 2.5, but your mana is roughly about in the same ballpark. Tier 2.5's got just a hair more mana, but nothing you're really going to notice out in the real world. You do have a little bit less attack power, and you have a little bit less crit than Tier 2.5, but you make up for it because, again, you have Exposed Weakness. Now, Exposed Weakness isn't going to do a lot for a majority of the fight, but that little bit that it procs, it can help immensely. You're talking about maybe close to a 10 DPS uptick, and honestly, I feel like if you look at the DPS difference, 752.6 to 748, that's, not even 5 DPS difference. So honestly, Exposed Weakness is really the difference here in a single target encounter. So again, if your guild is not allowing you to wear Tier 2.5, or excuse me, is not allowing you to wear 8 of 8 T2, similar to my guild, our hunters are kind of hamstrung. We're not allowed to wear 8 of 8 T2. You've got a couple of options to yourself. Option number 1, you slap on a alternative piece of gear to break it down to 7 of 8. You break that 8-piece set bonus, and you can wear mostly Dragonstalker. If you are the kind of person that's a stickler and you want to look like you're you know, one bad dude and you're wearing all Dragonstalker at all times, put on the wrist guards of True Flight. They don't show on your armor, on your person, and it looks like you're wearing 8 of 8 T2 when you're really only wearing 7 of 8. The other benefit of that too is that if you're doing that, you don't have to depend on the signet ring of Bronze Dragonflight. So you can actually get a little bit more DPS out of wearing Godslayer and you know, when you're wearing the wrist guards of True Flight. And honestly, at the end of the day, outside of exposed weakness proccing, you're not really losing any DPS single target wise, because you know the difference between Dragonstalker and, you know, Dragonstalker bracers rather and wrist guards of True Flight is about 4 agility. Well, the difference between, you know, the 2 rings, signet ring of the Bronze Dragonflight and the ring of the Godslayer, is 3 agility. So you're literally like, you're losing 1 agility, but you're maintaining, you don't have the 8 of 8, you do not have 8 of 8 Dragonstalker anymore to proc exposed weakness. So that's not your absolute best way to maintain more damage, but it is the best way to get the most amount of damage out of T2 with still looking like you're wearing full T2. Your best bet in the end, if you're fully buffed, is to go ahead and swap out the Dragonstalker shoulders for the Giantstalker shoulders. You'll drop from 752.6 to, let it update real fast. I really should have refreshed this beforehand. 752.6 to 744.5. So you're right underneath T2.5 at this point, but you're still ahead of T1 by a fair margin. So tier 2.5, tier 2, outside of exposed weakness, guys, it's really not even close. I mean, T2 is, you know, is going to live and die with exposed weakness procs, which is why a lot of guilds don't let hunters wear it, because they don't want to, they're afraid that it's going to proc more than once and knock off a debuff slot and all that other nonsense. So we're not going to drag on about that. But if you are able to wear full 8 of 8 T2, go for full 8 of 8 T2. It's your best bet in a PvE gearing instance. As far as what is the absolute single best target damage you can put out in a raid setting, that is going to be a mixture of PvP gear, rank 10 gear with rank 12 gear, and also, you know, you're going to slap on 3 pieces of T2 and 1 piece of, brace yourself, T2.5. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that's going to look like. Moving on to the PvP Ultimate BiS, I like to call it. You're going to slap on the rank 10 helm and shoulders. Now this is going to be really hectic for you guys, because you're going to have to farm up a bunch of Falcon's Call, I feel like. Unless you just holding on to them and you ain't been using them, then this is how you're going to want to spend these points. You want to put Falcon's Call on Lieutenant Commander's Chain Helm, and then you'll have the ZG enchant for the shoulders on Lieutenant Commander's Chain Spalders. Now this is the same thing for Horde as well. It's just, instead of Lieutenant Commander or Lieutenant Commander, it's going to be, you know, whatever y'all's equivalent rank is. Now, Prester as a Canary is you know, is a no-brainer. Fallen God, the melee weapons, the ranged weapon, the trinkets, the rings, all stay the same from previous builds. But you have Striker's chest piece here because it has the most to offer agility-wise. It has crit, it has agility, and you've got the Dragonstalker bracers, because again, they have maximum agility. And the Martial gloves, of course, not only for the crit, but also for that 4% increase to multi-shot. That is a huge benefit to your damage. Osiren's bindings, again, no-brainer for a belt that doesn't necessarily need to have a set bonus. It does, however, it is necessary to have Osiren's bindings to help you to fulfill the necessary hit cap. So hit cap is kind of an issue here, but with Osiren's bindings and with the signet ring of Bronze Dragonflight, you can bridge the gap. Also, the Dragonstalker leggings are here to help supplement your hit cap as well. And then, of course, Dragonstalker Griefs. What this is going to allow you to do, it's going to allow you to get the 20% increase to Aspect of the Hawk. Okay? Getting that 20% is huge. It's a big difference in your DPS. It's a big one, especially when we get rank 7 Aspect of the Hawk. So that's going to be a big benefit to your damage. It's also going to allow you to get your 4% increase to multi-shot from Martial Chain Grips, and it'll also allow you to get the plus 20 agility from the set bonus of the rank 10 gear. And then you're just filling in the holes with the best, highest agility, highest crit you can get out of a single chest piece, and that, of course, is going to be the Striker's Halberd. Dragonstalker lacks in 5 agility, and, of course, the Field Marshal gear drops also in 5 agility. So, obviously, at the end of the day, this is going to be your best bet to get that 39 agility, 1% crit. You cannot do any better than that in Phase 5. And again, going back to the melee weapons, you're talking about a difference of just just tiny, like microscopic differences. I mean, if you want to look at the difference between this, if you really wanted to go Fang, and again, keep this in mind, this is fully buffed. If you wanted to slap on, instead of Fang the Faceless, you wanted to slap on Brutality Blade, you're talking 763.1 to 763.3. Okay, so it's microscopic difference, but yes, Brutality Blade for Alliance and Horde, if they have Spirit of the Zandalar, is technically a little bit better, but only when you're fully raid buffed. And I'm kind of the mindset of, I want some gear that's a little bit dependent on raid buffs, but I want most of my gear to be not so dependent on raid buffs. I want to be able to go out in the open world and do a significant amount of damage on my own so that I can farm and do other things like kill, you know, King and whatnot in Dire Maul Tribute. I want to be able to fulfill my role as a solo player in the solo content in a way that it feels like I've progressed. It feels like I'm doing more damage. I don't want to just be sitting on T1 forever and not changing and not always constantly changing my weapons around, because that is going to be kind of a headache. If you have like 3 or 4 different weapons or 3 or 4 pieces of armor, depending on if you're buffed, you're not buffed, yeah, who wants to deal with that headache? But some people, they want to scrape off as much damage out in the open world when they're alone, and also do the same thing when they're in raid. So just know that option's there. Same thing with your trinkets. The trinkets are going to, you know, they're gonna change value depending on what you're doing. Obviously, you're probably not going to wear Badges of Swarm Guard out in the open world because, well, duh. I mean, you know, it needs to last for 30 seconds, and there's no mob that you're probably attacking for 30 seconds consistently. If you are, then you're probably kiting something, which means that, you know, how much damage you do isn't necessarily going to be dependent on that. So you're better off just slapping on something like Earth Strike or Devil Star Eye and, you know, using those 2-minute windows, just blow things up and then take a break, come back, blow stuff up again. So that's to each their own. Guys, this is it in a nutshell. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoy bringing this kind of content to you. It's one of my personal favorites. I know it's a favorite of the channel. So as always, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, be sure to hit me up in the Discord or tweet at me at SaltyZera. Also, be sure to swing by the stream. We stream there every week. Now that Munchkin's here, our schedule is a little wonky. We're trying to figure it out, but I will be streaming every Wednesday, Thursday, and at least one day on the weekend. So be sure to come by and say hello and let me know what you thought of the most recent video. As always, I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Zera out.